Astley here, play-by-play for the Abby Canucks. You got it locked on the Line Change, a Vancouver Canucks podcast.
What's up, Canucks Nation? Welcome back to the Line Change, or if you're new, welcome to the Line Change. Now, in this video, we're actually going to go over an article from our friends over at Canucks Army. I thought this was a fantastic article by Stéphane Roger, and I wanted us to talk about it as I really feel as though it could really, we could really debate over the topic of this article, and, we could have a little fun in the comment section. So let's go ahead and dive right into this. As you can tell by the title of this video, we're obviously going over Hindsight 2020. When should the Canucks have traded these assets? Well, you're probably wondering, what assets exactly are we talking about here? Well, let's go ahead and dive right into it. And of course, Stéphane Roger does want to clarify some things, where he goes on to say we have to start this one off with a conversation about what we mean when we say hindsight. For our purposes, we mean it in the sense of the phrase hindsight is 2020, meaning we acknowledge a distinct advantage in writing from a future perspective about events in the past, which means we are not writing this article as any sort of I told you so aimed at the management of the Vancouver Canucks. Instead, this is more of an if we could go back in time, we'd change these things sort of article. In other words, it's not about assigning blame, but more about wondering what could have been. With that out of the way, the premise is simple enough. We're going to focus on those Canucks assets who are part of the organization as of the start of this 25-26 campaign. Meaning, there will be no mention of JT Miller or Bo Horvat or anyone else traded in years past. From that, we're looking back to try to pinpoint when would have been the best time to cash in on that asset's maximum trade value. This will include those Canucks who have already been traded and those who are still with the team. It goes without saying that this is purely subjective and the debate is invited. So let's go ahead and take a look at the first name. These are, of course, in no particular order. First up, we have Brock Boeser. And Stéphane Roger puts he should have been traded in July of 2024. Obviously, Boeser is still part of the team, so there was no actual trade. We start out this thought experiment with one of our simplest hypotheses. Boeser should have been traded at some point before his current extension. That much is certain. Pinpointing a more specific date is a little bit tougher. It might be easy enough to say that it's trade deadline 2025, with Boeser as a pending UFA on the block, but we were told that the offers were not good at that time. Assuming that the team was never going to be willing to trade Boeser in the midst of its 40-goal 23-24 campaign, with the Canucks holding down a division lead, so we'll say the ideal date came a few months later in the 2024 offseason. Any team trading for Boeser after July 1st, 2024 would have been able to talk extension with him, and they'd be offering value in line with what has turned out to be Boeser's career best year by a long shot. It'd be a better than decent influx of future assets and the avoidance of a contract that has quickly become regrettable. Of course, we don't know if this would have actually happened. We all know Boeser bleeds blue and green. He bleeds Canucks. He plays for the crest, and he made it well known that he wants to be here and he doesn't want to be anywhere else, even though at one point we thought he was as good as gone. Looking at the second person on this list, and I think a lot of Canuck fans agree with this one, myself included, we of course have Thatcher Demko, and Stéphane Roger has him should have been traded in January 2025. Of course, Demko is still a part of the team and is of course done for the season. We continue our list of players who signed extensions last summer, and the theme is going to be they should have been traded instead of signing those extensions. That theme hits home hardest with Thatcher Demko. His near constant injuries make it tough to find the ideal window within which to trade him. Demko's best work came during that same 2023-24 season, as Boeser's did, but the chances of trading him within that season were of course non-existent. With the team on the way to the playoffs and no heir apparent at that time, then by the time the offseason rolled around, Demko was once again injured, having bowed out of said playoffs to make way for Artur Silovs. We'll instead skip ahead to partway through the 24-25 campaign that followed. Demko did not return until December, but then he stayed relatively healthy all the way through to February and put up some great games and great numbers as he did. By the 2025 trade deadline, he was injured again, but if the team could have managed to find a buyer for him somewhere in between, that would have been their best bet. If the team got anything back for Demko at that point, it would have been worth avoiding his current contract anchor situation. Moving on to the next person on this list, we have Connor Garland. Should have been traded the 2025 trade deadline. He was actually traded, so this is the first one who's actually been traded. He was actually traded the day before the deadline on March 5th, 2026 to Columbus for a 2028 second and 2026 third round pick. We swear the list will get a little more varied after this, but this is our third regrettable summer 2025 extension in a row. And the answer, once again, will be that Garland should have been traded before signing that contract. Garland's answer is the most straightforward. At least he was playing great and consistently great right up until his extension was signed and the 25-26 season began, so it makes the most sense to flip him at or around the 2025 trade deadline. With that extension still unsigned and Garland on the way to another 50-point season, there undoubtedly would have been sizable offers for 2 playoff runs with Garland with no commitment beyond that, and those offers almost certainly would have reached beyond the second and the third that Garland eventually returned. I just realized that it said the 2025 trade deadline, not the 2026. So they're saying he should have been traded a year earlier. And hey, it's like what we've talked about on this channel as well. You know, if the Canucks had traded Garland prior to him signing that extension, as what Stefan writes here at the bottom, the Canucks would have gotten more than what they got for Garland and, you know, could have very well gotten a first round pick or maybe even a first and a second, but they most certainly would have gotten a second round pick in this year's draft had they pulled the trigger a year ago. Moving on to the next one, we of course have Quinn Hughes. Should have been traded December 12th, 2025. And he was actually traded on December 12th, 2025 to Minnesota for Z Bouillon, Marco Rossi, Liam Ogren, and a 2026 first round pick. For a trade of this size and magnitude, most in the Canucks' orbit have little in the way of regrets. It has now become apparent that Hughes was going to be traded at some point, and now that it's happened, it's hard to imagine any point at which any better offer would have been made. It's clear enough that Wild GM Bill Guerin stepped up his offer to stand head and shoulders above the other bidders, and when that happened, the Canucks pulled the trigger. With no knowledge of any better offers at any point, and with the likelihood of Hughes' value dropping the closer he got to July 1st, and the ability to negotiate an extension, we have to conclude that the Canucks effectively did maximize their return for Hughes by trading him at the right time for the right offer. It was, after all, one of the largest returns garnered in any NHL trade in recent memory. Moving on to the next one, we have Evander Kane. Should have been traded November 2025. Of course, Kane is unfortunately still a member of the Canucks, so he was not traded. The short answer here is the first time another team made an offer for him, if that did actually ever come to pass. Kane is infamously still a Canuck post-trade deadline, the result of literally no offers being made for his services on or near deadline day. But there were whispers of teams being interested earlier in the year, and if so, that would have been the time to pull the trigger. If we had to guess when that might have been, we'd say it came about 2 months into the season in late November 2025. At that point, Kane was still receiving a boatload of even-strength ice time from Adam Foote and had a decent run of 14 points in his first 26 games. Even better, some of Kane's more frustrating attributes weren't as visible at that point. The Canucks were even offered a fifth-round pick back in November, or at any other date for Kane, they should have taken it. This one I actually agree with 100%. You guys know I'm not a big fan of Kane and was really let down and disappointed, frustrated that he wasn't traded at the deadline. But at the same time, you also have to look at it from another perspective. What teams really wanted Kane? You know, you have to think back when you traded for Evander Kane, what teams would want to take him on? because no teams were willing to trade for him when the Canucks did. So it kind of tells you something on that front. So what makes you think teams would want to trade for him now or in November or even at the deadline if, the Oilers didn't receive really a whole lot of other offers for Kane? I know we did hear some whispers when the Oilers traded Kane that there were some other teams who potentially interested, but we also don't know that for sure. Moving on to the next one, we have Kevin Lankinen, should have been traded February 20th, 2025. Of course, Lankinen is still part of the team, so there was no actual trade, but another extension signed in 2025, another one we'd like to avoid. Though this one came a little bit earlier than the summer, the fact of the matter is that Lankinen performed his career best work filling in for Demko last season, and that performance earned him what now looks like a somewhat ridiculous 5-year, $4.5 million AAV extension. The Canucks could go back and unsign that contract. They most likely would. That would allow them to cash in on whatever value he had during that run, avoid his extension, and probably keep Artur Silovs in-house for at least another season, if not longer. That trade could not have come at the 2025 trade deadline, as Lankinen had already signed his extension by that point. Said we'll say he should have been traded the day before his extension, which puts us at exactly February 20th, 2025. This will be our most specific answer by far. That one I also completely 100% agree with. Tyler Myers should have been traded during the 2025 offseason. The actual trade, March 4th, 2026, to Dallas for a 2027 second round and a 2029 fourth round pick. This one might be the trickiest. In the end, the value the Canucks received back for Myers was fine, and there's not too much reason for regret. But it's also true that Myers had a great season last year, that his performance took a tumble in 25-26. That means that the Canucks were probably best to sell Myers a little earlier, as in this past 2025 offseason. He, of course, still had 2 years of his $3 million AAV extension in place at that point and still had a no-move clause, but may have been willing to move with the Canucks on the decline a whole summer to think about it. And if teams were trading for the 24-25 version of Myers, they probably would end up paying more than a second and a fourth, at least by some degree. This move really requires the power of hindsight, however, because it requires knowledge that Tom Villander's transition to the NHL would be smooth and that Myers would become superfluous sooner than later. Otherwise, there was no real chance of the Canucks trading Myers this past summer. Looking on at the next one, we of course have Elias Pettersson, the forward. Should have been traded February 2024. Of course, PD is still a part of this team, so there was no actual trade. This one may be controversial, but it's also surprisingly an easy call. We know that throughout early 2024, the Canucks were in a bit of a game of chicken with Pettersson. Contract negotiations were ongoing, but so were trade negotiations, with word being that if Pettersson didn't give the Canucks the extension they wanted, he'd be shipped out of town. At the time, the heaviest rumors suggested that the Carolina Hurricanes were in on him and were offering a package that centered around Marty Necas. In the end, the Canucks signed Pettersson to an 8-year, $11.6 million extension on March 2nd, 2024, and his performance has only continued to decline from there. Necas, meanwhile, has 162 points in 140 games over the past 3 seasons. They could go back in time. The Canucks would simply take the Hurricanes up on their offer and never look back. A straight-up Necas for Pettersson swap would look great in the rearview mirror, and that's to say nothing of the bonus assets that Carolina was rumored to be including. Now, this one, if this whole package centered around Marty Necas is in fact true, of course, it's still a rumor, was never really confirmed, but if this was the case, I would have done this in a freaking heartbeat. I absolutely love Marty Necas as a player. When I heard this back then, I was like, yes, get us Marty Necas. This guy's a stud. Absolutely. And I know there's a lot of talk about, Jesperi Kotkaniemi. And, I've voiced my displeasure of, bringing him in and having him part of the trade as well. But you know what? If it meant getting Marty Necas and if Kotkaniemi was part of the package, along with, I don't know, whatever else was part of the package, but if he was part of the package, honestly, I would have been okay with trading Pettersson back then, so long as we got Marty Necas and, we had him. And hey, if we end up flipping Kotkaniemi for something else down the line, cool. And hey, if Kotkaniemi actually managed to simply, turn things around and, get that change of scenery that he seems to desperately need out of Carolina, and he end up actually working out, so be it. So I 100% would have done this back in February of 2024, especially if Marty Necas was actually, in fact, involved in the package for this. I would 100% do this. Now, looking at the next one, we have Marcus Pettersson. Should have been traded immediately or never traded for. Of course, Marcus Pettersson is still a part of the Canucks. Now, Stéphane Roger says, apologies if this one sounds a bit harsh, but it's true. Honestly, this is not harsh at all. Marcus Pettersson has been absolutely freaking terrible. And I don't even know why the Canucks even traded for him in the first place, considering how he's been this year. The Canucks took the then conditional first-round pick they got from the Rangers and turned it into Marcus Pettersson and Drew O'Connor. That pick ended up at 12th overall, which is already too much to pay for such a return. The Canucks doubled down by extending Pettersson a few days later, and although he had a fine end to the 24-25 campaign, his 25-26 has been dismal. Looking back, it would have been best to either flip Pettersson immediately, if that were possible, or to instead simply not trade for him. Keep that conditional first and make a selection at 12th overall. Trade a lower pick for O'Connor and pick up some cheaper veteran left defenseman somewhere along the way, and the Canucks are sitting in a much better position and feel a lot better about the whole Miller departure too. Now, we do have one more. So let me just remove one of these, and I will quickly bring it up. This is actually the last one on this list. But like I mentioned already, this article has been absolute fire, and I absolutely love it. So once again, great work from Stéphane Roger. Of course, the last one on this list is, of course, Kiefer Sherwood. It says here, should have been traded January 19th, 2026. And he actually was traded on January 19th, 2026 to San Jose for a 2026 second-round pick, a 2027 second-round pick, and Cole Clayton. We know that the Canucks were asking for a first-round pick or more for Sherwood. We can also reasonably assume that such a return was never offered, because if it had been, the Canucks probably would have jumped on it. Instead, they jumped on 2 seconds in the next 2 drafts, and that feels like a fine result. Given the other returns between January and the deadline, Sherwood went for about as much as he was ever going to get. Given Sherwood's injuries and slowing down, there was every chance the Canucks would have gotten a lower return had they waited closer to the deadline. If there's any solace to the 25-26 season, it's that the Canucks probably managed to trade their 2 top tradable assets in both Sherwood and Hughes at the right time to maximize their return values. There are plenty of regrets to be found in this article, but not with these 2 players at least. So there you guys go. That is the article. I will, of course, leave a link to it in the description down below. You guys can read it for yourselves and check it out. But I want to hear from you guys. Let me know in the comment section down below, what do you guys think about this article and this list of, players that, when should the Canucks have traded these assets? Do you agree with what Stéphane Roger says in this article? I know I certainly agree with the Evander Kane one, the Marcus Pettersson one, the Kevin Lankinen one, and I guess you can throw the Elias Pettersson one in there, especially, as I mentioned, if it involves Marty Necas. Absolutely 100%. But I want to know what you guys think, and if you guys enjoyed this video, hit that like button and subscribe to The Line Change, and be sure to have your notifications turned on so you don't miss more in-depth analysis of your Vancouver Canucks. Let's, of course, take a look at the NHL odds and lines for today, of course, March 15th. 2026. And a quick note on Garland, I forgot to mention. Yes, we all saw he had 4 goals in about 3 games with the Blue Jackets. Since then, he's gone 2 games pointless. So about that post-trade bump, maybe it's come and gone already. But let's check out the lines and odds for DraftKings for today. Wait for it to load. Let's take a look at the Sharks and Senators. San Jose Sharks are at a plus 1.5 on the puck line and a minus 142. The Senators are at a minus 1.5 and a plus 120 on the puck line. The Sharks are a plus 170 on the money line, and the Senators are a minus 205 on the money line. Just a quick reminder that these odds are subject to change, and of course, please play responsibly. On that note, I want to shout out and thank a sponsor of this video, none other than DraftKings Sportsbook, which is, of course, an official sports betting partner of the NHL. DraftKings Sportsbook, an official sports betting partner of the NHL, is built for the fastest game on ice. With player props and live betting, every shift, every shot, every save gives you options to get in on the game with DraftKings Sportsbook. New customers bet just $5, and if your bet wins, you get $300 in bonus bets instantly. Download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and use code THPN, that's code THPN, to turn $5 into $300 in bonus bets if your bet wins. In partnership with DraftKings, the crown is yours. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. In New York, call 877-8-HOPE-NY or text HOPE-NY. In Connecticut, call 888-789-7777 or visit ccpg.org. On behalf of Boot Hill Casino in Kansas, wager tax pass-through may apply in Illinois, 21 plus in most states. Void in Ontario, restrictions apply. Bet must win to receive bonus bets, which will expire in 7 days. Minimum odds required. For additional terms and responsible gaming resources, see dkng.co/audio. This is a limited time offer. Copyright 2026 NHL, all rights reserved. This video has been a presentation of both DraftKings Sportsbook as well as the Hockey Podcast Network. Be sure to check out the network for your favorite podcast covering your favorite team at thehockeypodcastnetwork.com, the home of hockey podcasts, where it's every team, everywhere. Once again, drop your comments down below. Thanks for tuning in, and I'll catch you guys on the next line change.